Joining us now from Wyoming is the vice chair of that committee, Congresswoman Liz Cheney. Welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thanks, Brett. Great to be with you.
Congressman, you said last hearing, quote, the dam has begun to break. What's the newest, most surprising information you've uncovered or discovered as vice chair of the January 6th committee?
Well, certainly we've seen over the course of the last several weeks and reaching back a little bit before that, a real increase in the amount of information and the numbers of people who are coming forward. I think that certainly Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony had a lot to do with that. But even before that, the reality is that the committee has collected so much in terms of documents and in terms of testimonial evidence that the real challenge for us is to make sure that we're providing that to the American people in a way that helps to organize and convey the threat that the nation faced, and that we're putting it into our process to come up with legislative recommendations to help make sure nothing like that ever happens again.
What's the ultimate goal of the committee? Is it to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't ever become president again, or is it to move forward, lay out a case, prod the Justice Department to move forward with charges?
Well, the goal of the committee and our obligation is our legislative purpose of looking at whether or not, for example, we need enhanced criminal penalties for the kind of activity Donald Trump engaged in when he attempted to pressure the Georgia officials, or, for example, whether we might need enhanced criminal penalties for something like the supreme dereliction of duty that we saw from President Trump on January 6th. So that's our obligation, that's our responsibility. This was a fundamental assault and an attack on our democracy. You know, we had a president who sent a mob that he knew was armed to the Capitol to attack and invade while we were counting electoral votes, delayed the count of those votes, and while the attack was underway, it is unquestionable that he did not tell them to go home for hours. And investigating that attack and what led to it, and what we need to do legislatively to make sure it never happens again is our fundamental responsibility.
So do you believe that former President Trump should face charges?
I believe that's a decision the Justice Department will make. I believe that the former president is responsible for a more significant breach of his constitutional duty than any president in our history. I think that what you've seen, and remember, our testimony has come primarily from Republican witnesses, from Republicans in Donald Trump's Justice Department, from Republicans in his campaign, from Republicans in his White House, people who have come forward to say that he attempted to overturn an election, that the election was not stolen, that there was no evidence of fraud sufficient to overturn the election. Even Rudy Giuliani, his lawyer, made clear that he did not have sufficient evidence to overturn the election. It simply wasn't stolen. And Donald Trump has preyed on the patriotism of honorable and good people all across this country with the big lie. And it's very important for people to understand that it's simply not true.
The Attorney General seems reluctant. This is what he said this week.
There is a lot of speculation about what the Justice Department is doing, what it's not doing, what our theories are, what our theories aren't. We have to do two things. We have to hold accountable every person who is criminally responsible for trying to overturn a legitimate election, and we must do it in a way filled with integrity and professionalism.
So do you have any indication the DOJ is moving forward?
Well, I think what the Attorney General said there is exactly right. And I think that it's very clear from what's available publicly that they're engaged in, it's the largest criminal investigation in U.S. history. You've also seen publicly indications that what they're engaged in is quite broad. You've seen Jeff Clark's phone seized and John Eastman's phone seized. You've seen a focus, some of which is public and some isn't. But the Justice Department's obligation is to follow the facts and the evidence, and it's a solemn obligation that they must pursue no matter whether that means following, the facts and the evidence with respect to the President of the United States or with respect to those people who invaded the Capitol. But let me also say, Brett, that Judge Carter, a federal judge, has already indicated and has already ruled that it's more likely than not that President Trump violated at least two criminal statutes with respect to his efforts to get Vice President Pence to illegally refuse to count electoral votes. And so I think we've already seen a basis for that.
A couple quick specifics. When do you expect to hear from Tony Ornato, then President Trump's Deputy Chief of Staff, now Secret Service training official, Bobby Engel, President Trump's lead Secret Service agent, under oath? Is there a holdup here? Do you expect to hear testimony from them?
I do. We have already heard testimony from them. I expect that we will again. Mr. Ornato has retained private criminal defense counsel, and we've seen that also with respect to one other Secret Service agent. I think that's significant, but we do anticipate not just them, certainly them, but largely what's happened at the Secret Service, and I say this as someone who has huge respect for the Secret Service. I was protected by them for 8 years. But the extent to which there are no text messages from the relevant period of time, the extent to which we have not had the kind of cooperation that we really need to have, those are all things the committee is going to be looking at in more detail in the coming weeks.
All right. And what will the committee's report have to say about why the assets like National Guard weren't prepped and ready? Is there a testimony already gathered on Speaker Pelosi's decisions or the Sergeant of Arms in the House and Senate on that regard?
Yeah, we have an entire team. We've got 5 different teams in the investigation. One of them is totally focused on all of those issues of security at the Capitol and the response of the Capitol Police, the response of the National Guard, the response of the Capitol Police Board, what was going on at the Pentagon that day. So it's an entire focus of the investigation. You will see in our report, you will likely see in upcoming hearings. And so it's certainly something that we're going to be very focused on. But what we aren't going to do, Brett, is blame the Capitol Police, blame those in law enforcement for Donald Trump's armed mob that he sent to the Capitol.
Okay.
I think clearly there were intelligence failures. Clearly there were intelligence failures. Clearly the security should have operated better than it did. But this was a mob Donald Trump sent to the Capitol, and I think that's important to keep our eye on.
There are several witnesses who say they met with President Trump on January 4th, and he offered some 20,000 National Guardsmen to protect the Capitol building on January 6th, but the offer was rejected. Is that true? Do you know that to be true?
Well, his own acting Secretary of Defense says that's not true. Chris Miller has testified publicly that Donald Trump never issued any order to deploy the Guard to protect the Capitol. And so I would point people to his own Secretary of Defense's public testimony. And we also know that on January 6th, while the attack was underway, Donald Trump did not place a single phone call to anyone at the Pentagon. He didn't place a single phone call to anyone at the Justice Department to say deploy law enforcement. He didn't place a single phone call to anybody at the Department of Homeland Security. And so the notion that somehow he issued an order is not consistent with the facts.
Okay, we'll listen to what comes out of the hearing, but you know the critics of the January 6th committee say it's a show trial. You know, how do you respond to that? They list these things. They say it's produced by television professionals who clearly lean left. It airs in prime time. There's no opportunity for the target to defend or put forth a defense. There's no cross-examination of witnesses, a duty deeply ingrained, they say, in American notions of due process. They say House rules require an aiming for a ranking member to be put forward by the minority. They have a problem with the fact that you are that ranking member, even though you were selected by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. So how do you respond to that criticism?
Well, I think it's important to remember the facts. And the first fact is that we all supported a bipartisan outside commission. Kevin McCarthy himself said on the floor of the House we needed a bipartisan outside commission to investigate this attack. And then after he negotiated with the Democrats and got all of the terms he wanted, he pulled the rug out from under the Republicans who were supporting it and made sure that it was defeated in the Senate. And so then once the bipartisan outside commission was defeated, the only alternative left to us was this committee. And after Kevin McCarthy named his members to the committee and Speaker Pelosi rejected 2 of them, Jim Jordan and Jim Banks, for good reason, I supported her decision to do that, Kevin McCarthy withdrew all of his other nominees. And so the notion now that somehow the committee is incapable of getting to the facts of what happened because Kevin McCarthy withdrew his nominees is nonsensical. It also is a diversion. And I point out again, nearly every single one of our witnesses has been a Republican. You know, Rusty Bowers, Brad Raffensperger,
No, I
Gabe
understand.
Sterling,
We have the list.
Bill Barr. Right, but
I
it's
guess
an important thing to
cross-examination
remember.
is an important thing in committee hearings, right?
Brett, right. That's right. But I would also point out that I think it is highly unlikely, and I think you would agree, that any of those witnesses' testimony would be any different had the questioning been different. And it would be a dereliction of our duty to be in a position where, because Kevin McCarthy decided to withdraw nominees, and he decided to do that, I'm quite confident, because Donald Trump told him to, because Kevin McCarthy decided not to participate in the committee, that somehow the House of Representatives cannot investigate the single worst attack on the United States Capitol since the War of 1812.
Right.
And it is also a diversion from what we know. The facts are indisputable that while the Capitol was being attacked by a mob sent by Donald Trump, armed, Donald Trump would not tell them to go home for over 187 minutes. That is a dereliction of duty like we have never seen before.
You've said the single most important thing is protecting the nation from Donald Trump. You are in a tough primary in Wyoming against Trump-backed Harriet Hageman. The recent polls show her up by more than 20 points. If you lose, do you see that as an indictment on your battle against Trump?
Look, I am working hard to earn every single vote, but I will tell you, Brett, that given the choice between maintaining my seat in the House of Representatives on the one hand, or ensuring the survival of our constitutional republic and ensuring the American people know the truth about Donald Trump, I will choose the Constitution and the truth every day of the week and twice on Sunday. We have a fundamental obligation, an oath that I and my colleagues took under God to the Constitution, that is the single most important obligation we have when faced with the threat that Donald Trump presents.
This is how the AP writes it today. As the primary day approaches, there is also a pervasive belief among Cheney's team that her unorthodox strategy in 2022 may put her in a stronger position for the 2024 presidential contest. Cheney's fierce anti-Trump message as vice chairman of the Congressional Committee investigating the insurrection has strengthened her national brand while expanding a national network of donors and Trump critics in both parties who could boost a prospective White House run. Is that the strategy? Are you expecting to lose? Are you going to run for president?
Look, my focus, Brett, is absolutely on doing what is right. And that is what's guided me ever since last election, and in the lead up to the objections in the House and the work that I did to help to make sure that my colleagues understood that we could not overturn an election in the House on January 6th. It's guided me at every moment since then, and it's guided my work on this committee. And look, it's not just me that is saying that Donald Trump is unfit for office. It's other entities owned by Rupert Murdoch. It's the New York Post in their editorial on Friday. It's the Wall Street Journal said the same thing after our hearing on Thursday night. So I'm going to continue to be guided by making sure I do my duty and making sure that the American people understand the truth.
Last thing, do you share the concerns of some of your colleagues and others in the Republican Party about the Biden family's dealings in China, the flow of money from the Beijing government linked officials to the Bidens?
Yeah, I certainly think that it could be of concern. I think that it's not something that I have looked at the details of. I've certainly seen the news reports of it, but I think that it's important for any president, no matter the party, to make sure that there's not even the appearance of any sort of a conflict. And so I think that on both sides, we really need to be in a position where we gain back the credibility of the American people where we step back from the edge of the toxicity and the vitriolic battles that are going on. If there is something substantive on either side that Congress needs to be looking at, we should certainly do that. And I think that has to be guided by substance and not by political attack. I mean, I was really disgusted, frankly, on Thursday night when, even before Sarah Matthews began testifying, the House Republicans put out a tweet attacking her that they then had to take down. She's a staffer. She works for the House Republicans, for a House Republican. That kind of just launching of vitriolic partisan attacks is really dangerous for the country, given where we are today. So we've got to investigate anything that seems like there's concern, and I do have concern about the issues that you've raised, but we need to do it with responsibility on both sides and with a commitment to the facts.
Congresswoman, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Brett. Great to be with you.